It is Thursday, August 20th, 2020. Kate has just acknowledged that I control the length of her hair, which is false. It is the final day of the Democratic convention, and
Have you watched any of it?
I have watched a fair bit of it, and our guest, Sarah Longwell, I suspect has watched even more. Have you watched any of it?
Every last minute.
How about you, Kate?
Not a single minute.
Excellent. So we've got the ground, the lay of the land covered here. So I want to tell you all about how much time I have spent in front of this miserable camera today. Starting at 9:30, I had my 9:30 editorial meeting. Immediately thereafter, I had a Zoom meeting with a funder, and then I recorded a 2-hour podcast. Immediately thereafter, I recorded the Lawfare podcast discussion of the Senate Intelligence Committee report. And 45 minutes after that was done, I am here in front of this camera again, in front of this microphone. My voice is getting a little bit edgy. We are not allowed to have fun anymore. But, you know, in lieu of fun, we have about the next best thing, which is Sarah Longwell. And Sarah, first, we got to start with why you are wearing what you are wearing right now.
So this is my homage to Steve Bannon. You know, the thing that I've always admired about Steve Bannon is how he does the he's a layered fellow. He likes to do the layers. He likes to do the multi-collar. And so, you know, listen, he's having a tough day today. And so I thought I'd lend some moral support by, you know, sharing his fashion choices. How's it look?
Why is Steve Bannon having a rough day? Literally, you have to understand, I have not looked at the news all day.
Steve Bannon got indicted today and arrested. And Sarah, why don't you start by telling Kate what caused Steve Bannon? You can't make this shit up. I mean, even on In Lieu of Fun, on a day where we're not allowed, this is about as close to fun as it gets. What happened to poor Steve Bannon
today?
today?
To explain this to me?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try not to sound giddy as I do this. I'm also like, just what are you doing, Kate? That this is a thing that you could have missed.
I'm trying to finish an article. Kate gets
deep into her work.
I know. I was trying to finish an article. Honestly, I've been transcribing my interview with Mark Zuckerberg from last week and trying to make sure I didn't screw that up. And then I was trying to finish this article that I told my editor I would have before my birthday, and my birthday was July 6th. So, all
right. Well, your procrastination cost you what is one of the better news days. Because Steve Bannon was arrested today. He was arrested on a yacht. He was arrested. Let me give you the best data point by the Postal Service. And they're
U.S. postal inspectors, the mysterious missing FBI, was nowhere, doesn't seem to have been involved in this investigation.
How on earth does the Postal Service
arrest
it gets
someone? Better.
Nope.
Oh my God.
Sarah,
oh my God.
What was he arrested for?
He was arrested because in a money laundering scheme in which he was part of the group that ran that, you would recall perhaps this, where there was an independent fundraising effort to build the wall that quickly on GoFundMe or one of those, raised like $20 million and everything. So and eventually they shut that down, right? The GoFundMe people shut it down because it looked so strange that there was a private fundraising operation to build the wall that was going to give money to the federal government. So they forced them off the platform and into a private C4 organization that was run by, you guessed it, Steve Bannon. And turns out,
and guess where the money did not go, Kate?
Turns out that while they were raising the money, they said,
holy shit, this is why content moderation on private platforms matters. Every single platform has some type of rule where they just cut people off and are like, this seems shady. Like Kickstarter has one. All of them have these types of things. So hold on. Let me just try to grok this. They created a private fundraising scheme to fund the wall that would be the job of the federal government to actually build. And this raised eyebrows at a private platform that like has things. So they kicked it off, but they still gave it the money to go set itself up as the C4.
So they did it. They made a condition that they could keep the money if they put it into a 501c3 or C4 registered charity, which one Steve Bannon had access to. I set up a 501c4, put the money in it, continued to raise money under the guise of not only building the wall, but they did say very explicitly that they were volunteers, that they would take absolutely no money. They said it over and over again in fundraising material. They said it to old people who were making donations by saying, I don't have very much to give, but I believe so strongly in building this wall that I'm going to give this money to you. At which point the people from the C4 would represent back to them that, of course, every penny of this was going to build the wall. And this is where it's going to shock you. The money did not, in fact, go to build the wall, but was being funneled to Steve Bannon and through Steve Bannon to other people affiliated with the charity. And so now,
wow,
it is important to say that all of these are mere allegations.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is allegedly. You have to put allegedly in front of all of these.
You have to put allegedly in front of every one of these sentences. And Steve Bannon and his co-defendants are all innocent until proven guilty. None of this has been proven. And yet, there was sufficient probable cause of these allegations to lead Mr. Bannon off the yacht into federal custody.
Was the yacht bought? Was the yacht bought with like the money for the wall?
No, the yacht appears to be the possession of a Chinese mogul of some sort. Is that right?
Yes, some kind of Chinese dissident. It's unclear.
God bless you, Sarah. This is better than. Oh, I don't know. This is better than TV.
God,
this is better.
The ability to be the one to tell you this, just to get been such a pleasure.
This is great. I literally had no idea. I have not looked at it. I have not even procrastinated on like any part of I haven't even looked at Twitter except to retweet that you were coming on the show.
It is like, I have to say, of all the things I am not to be, I thought I was beyond surprise in the criminality of the
this is incredible.
Close to the president. But I actually never thought this of Bannon. I always thought Bannon was kind of a true believer of a bunch of things that I find repellent, but he always struck me as sort of like relatively sincere in his beliefs about them. And the idea that he is merely an alleged grifter stealing money from people who want to build the wall, frankly, never crossed my mind, and I was quite surprised to read about this.
It seems like such a. But what's kind of shocking to me, Sarah, and I'm curious if this is your thought too, or Ben, your thoughts. Like, this just seems like so one-to-one in terms of like embezzlement, like that it's not even interesting. Like, it's almost like, how could this be? Like, how could they think this was okay? Is it like? Unless you decide, like, how are they going to justify this is, I guess, what I'm basically, like, wondering. Like, how could you possibly, like, put up a defense against this? Like, they have to have very clear evidence that, like, the money went from this account and then Steve Bannon spent it on, I don't know, sweatshirts and, like, polo shirts.
Yeah, and a lot of personal expenses. Look, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what the defense is, and I haven't like carefully studied money laundering. But I would say the one thing that might lend itself to the idea that maybe this isn't like a massive criminal enterprise is just how straightforward it is as money laundering goes. Like, they set up, a shell company to pass like expenses through. It wasn't very elaborate, or like I read I like skimmed the indictment earlier, and I was like, oh, they didn't try that hard to hide things. It was like very clear what was going on.
Well, that's just kind of like what I mean. Like I used to cover like Ted Stevens and Don Young and a lot of the earmarks and a lot of the campaign contributions that came through. And like it was twisted, right? It was never like one to one. It was like hidden. Like they would get free work done, like $20,000 in free work done to their home, like a renovation or
But they're
something.
politicians. Bannon is not in office. He's not, right. Like there's not, he's allowed to do whatever business he wants. The problem here is that it's an alleged fraud,
Yeah.
right? It's not, like
Yeah.
he's not bound by, any, laws that, require honest services or whatnot. He's not a public official at this point.
I am so in love with I'm just still trying to, this is out of the blue for everyone, right? Like no one saw this coming.
No,
I didn't even know that Bannon was associated with the private Build the Wall GoFundMe. I mean, I had heard of that thing and I knew that it had raised
Yeah.
a lot of money before GoFundMe took it down.
Oh, can someone tell me Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
But
you.
I'd never heard, I don't think I ever knew that Bannon was involved with that, let alone allegedly siphoning money off of it. So, look, I have not read the court papers yet, and it's a little bit far afield of my areas of expertise. It seems like a sort of garden variety fraud case. But I do think it's super interesting that it's another close Trump aide has been prosecuted. I also think the role of the Southern District of New York is really interesting here. This case may, when you think about the firing of Jeffrey Berman and his suggestion that he wanted to protect the caseload of the office, this case was brought by his successor, the woman who he held on long enough that she took it over. And so was this the case or one of the cases that he was thinking about? Might really, is a question that's worth pondering. It's hard for me to imagine that this case developed over such a short period of time. These kind of white collar cases they tend to be a little bit longer legged than that. So, it's a pretty interesting situation, and important enough, obviously, to affect Sarah Longwell's wardrobe choices of the day. Which brings us, of course, to the Democratic Convention. If you were wanted to set up Joe Biden's speech, having spent the last few days talking about him as decent and level-headed and with good judgment, like the indictment of another top aide to the president and his campaign manager wouldn't be a bad way to set that up. But what you'd really want is 4 days or 3 days previously of a good convention. So you're a longtime Republican operative who's gone over to the other side for this election. How do you rate the performance of the Democratic Party in its convention so far?
Yeah, I'm not great. I've been to some conventions and I don't like attending them whatsoever because I do find the energy of people who are that tribal about politics, I find like a little it's just like never really been my thing. But I really love watching conventions. And I
as a TV experience.
Yeah, as a TV experience. I like, and some of it is because for me, I like watching people perform in high pressure situations. And I always think conventions are like that. Like the thing about, I'll never forget about Sarah Palin is I remember when she had to make her convention speech and she was walking across what to me looked like an incredibly buffed floor in high heels to make her, debut. And I just remember like as a woman watching it being like, just be okay. Like, just be able to don't fall. Don't let anything bad happen.
She nailed that speech too.
She nailed that speech. I remember. I mean,
that was her high point.
That was. So anyway, so I liked them as a TV experience. I'm not loving this one as a TV experience, in large part probably because it's hard, right? It's not like it's hard to produce this kind of an event, and it's super choppy. In that, like last night, there was like a really great speech by Barack Obama that was riveting, and I thought really landed and emotionally, resonated with me. And then I thought, Kamala Harris had a very average speech, and that was, I thought, diminished by the absence of a crowd and the cheering and was very personal. And I'll say that my biggest issue with it, because there's things that I've liked about it, but my biggest issue is, look, I am convinced that at this point, America understands the pluses and minuses of Donald Trump. Obviously, I think they're mostly minuses, but I think, having done maybe not hundreds, but dozens and dozens and probably close to 100 focus groups with Trump voters, soft Trump voters, I know that they know how they feel about Donald Trump. What they don't know is how they feel about Joe Biden. And I feel like, this is Joe Biden, and the biggest thing that I hear from voters, and I think that voters are wondering is Joe Biden up to this? Is Joe Biden, do I have an affirmative reason to vote for him? I can understand my reasons not to vote for Donald Trump. And I'm a little unsure why there hasn't been more. I think the highest points have been like the Amtrak, package that they put together, places where they tell Joe Biden's personal narrative and they make the case for him. But it's been really light on policy in terms of like, here's what we want to do. And I just think going from sort of like Dem politician to Dem politician to say something is not nearly as effective as them really trying to connect people to who Joe Biden is. And I think tonight is going to be a really big night because people are wondering, like, does he still have it? Right? Donald Trump has spent hundreds of millions of dollars to prosecute the case against Joe Biden, basically being like, this guy's mentally unfit. And he's either made a huge mistake by lowering the bar and setting expectations so low that if Joe Biden comes out and isn't, losing his train of thought every 5 minutes and drooling on himself, he will have exceeded the expectations that Donald Trump has set for himself. But anyway, I feel like
hang on that note, if he does really well, and by the way, I have memories of Joe Biden from the early 90s that are as incoherent as anything that people point to today, suggesting that he's lost it. So I think he's I've seen no evidence that he's cognitively different from the way he was 30 years ago. I think just people forget that he is one of the most inarticulate politicians in American life, in a way
I'm
that
laughing
was, by the way,
because I don't have that long term of a memory of Joe Biden at all.
During the Ruth Bader Ginsburg hearings, Joe Biden asked a single question that the New Republic, somebody should dig this up. The New Republic published it as an article. And it's just a stretch of transcript. It's 3 full columns, of 1 full page, the 3-column page of transcript. And they entitled it Blah, Blah, Blah by Joe Biden. And it is a single stream of consciousness, incoherent question that he poses to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And the punchline is at the end, she says to him, "I'm sorry, Senator, I couldn't follow that. Can you repeat the question?" And that's the article. And that was Joe Biden in 1993, right? And so I'm amazing. Not really, somebody should dig that up. It's called Blah, 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 published by the New Republic in 1993. It's there somewhere. And I'm like fading out into white here. I'm just like,
I don't know what's going on.
No, it's just that the sun is going down, and so my white shirt is all right. Here,
it looks like Back to the Future, where you start to disappear piece by piece.
Yeah, exactly.
We've had this really like belies any type of UFO sighting or anything else, because I've literally seen Ben melt into oblivion, like on video footage. But anyways,
but wait, let me just that was a long way of getting to my question, which is, okay, so the one thing we know Joe Biden has always been able to do is read a good teleprompter speech. And by the way, he's very sharp in individual meetings. He can
ride a bicycle.
Yeah, I mean, he's not like an unintelligent person. He's just, a little bit aphasic. But all right, so he's going to go out there tonight. He's going to deliver his speech. He's going to be just fine at delivering his speech. And what will we learn from that? It seems to me we'll learn nothing except that Joe Biden is actually just as capable as he's always been. He's just as capable of being inarticulate and also of giving a good speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is what we will learn, as in the people on this podcast who pay attention to politics all the time. I will say, I do these focus groups now every other week, and I do a couple every time I do them. And it has been shocking to me how, on one hand, Joe Biden's been in public life for 35 years. He's the vice president's the most recent president. You think he's pretty well defined, but he's not. And so there's a lot of white space actually with voters, especially with, I would say, the voters that I think about reaching, which are right-leaning independents. It's just people who just don't pay as much attention to politics. And so when Donald Trump is able, when all they're seeing from Joe Biden are the cuts from, the RNC Oppo shop that are just gaffe after, or sort of slip of the tongue after slip of the tongue, they have, the Trumps have been painting an image of Biden as somebody who is, Brit Hume was on Fox News the other day, literally calling Joe Biden senile. And so that, I think that for the American people to see that he is capable that he's still got it is actually extremely important. I also think that there's a real sense of people not knowing what it is he stands for. Right. So the other narrative that.
So is that what you mean? Just to be clear, you said he's not really well defined. Like, is that what you mean? Like, by what he stands for? Or do you mean
both?
Okay. But what's the other both? What's the.
Well, the both that he's undefined in terms of people feeling like he's up to it. Like people wonder if he's up to it. And then two, they're not quite sure what he stands for. So many voters right now are just starting to tune in. The number of people that I talk to who say, politics is so negative, I'm not really listening, but voting's my civic duty. I'm going to vote. So I need to do some research and I need to learn more about Biden. When we test commercials and things like that in the focus groups, one of the ones that always does the best are the Joe Biden videos where he talks about just his commercials where it's like, his very uniting language. He talks about, look, I'm not going to always get things right, but I'm going to take responsibility for the job and for what I do and all. And people are like, wow, that sounds fantastic. But they really don't have much of a sense of him. And so I actually think there is in it. It seems like it won't be, but I genuinely believe that this matters in terms of him introducing himself to a broader audience. Republicans or right-leaning independents or just a lot of voters, they weren't watching the Democratic primaries. They weren't super tuned in. Oh, and sorry. But the other thing that Trump has really defined him on is the idea that he's gone very far left, right? This is the other thing that the Trump guys have been trying to pump into the system. I don't think it's quite been landing because he does have a profile as a moderate and he ran as the most moderate person in a big field of Democrats. But
yeah, but I think that Warren and everyone else did him a huge favor there, right?
Yeah, but this is, if you've been paying attention to the way that Republicans are trying to attack him and define him, it's like AOC and Elizabeth Warren are going to run Joe Biden. He's addled and he's old and they're going to just be pulling the strings. And I think that, I think him going out there tonight and saying, I don't think we should defund the police and, condemn violence, because that is a thing that's really landing with people out in the world.
Wait, so you think that he should go right/center because that will pick up soft Trump voters and obviously no Black Lives Matters, no defund the police. People are going to not vote for Biden over Trump.
I don't know that it's just soft Trump voters. I think it's independents. I think there's been, and I've seen quite a bit of data on this, that the country was really with the protesters after the George Floyd killing, and they were really against the way Donald Trump was handling things. And that number has started as as what we're seeing happen in Seattle and in Chicago and some of these places has become divorced and further away from the precipitating event of George Floyd, what people see is the violence, and that support for the protesters has been dramatically eroding. And the support for Donald Trump's, what I think we all saw as very heavy-handed approach to trying to quell the protest by sending in National Guard, that is starting to become more popular. And whenever you do a focus group, when I do a focus group now, I've seen this absolutely shift, where people now start saying, I'm really concerned about all the violence I'm seeing. 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, that law and order stuff wasn't landing anywhere. And now it's starting to. And so it's not that I think Joe Biden should go right, because I don't think it's right to say,
sure,
condemn violence and to say that defund the police isn't his position, because it's not his position. I just think he needs to define himself to some degree and let Trump stop defining, so Trump can't keep defining him.
So explain something. If you were well, before we get to the Republican convention, Biden has to go out there and give this speech tonight. It's not a normal convention. It's not clear to me anyway how many people are actually going to see this speech. All the political junkies will, but you're talking as though he has a normal convention audience for his big speech. And my question is, what do we know about how many of these soft Trump voters, how many of the sort of normal up for grab undecideds are actually watching any of this?
Yeah, I think some of them are. I think lots of them aren't. I think that more people will watch the debates for a variety of reasons. I think one of the selling points for me of Joe Biden and the current, just Democrats right now is that they're kind of boring. The roll call and the intro with all the diverse Americans and them singing the national anthem, I was just crying because I was so moved by the normalcy of it all and the sort of corny regular people loving America. I was so there for that, but I'm not sure it's not creating the spectacle that I think probably the Republicans might create. But anyway, to the point about, are they watching? It matters less about whether or not they're watching. It matters more about the overall impression it leaves in terms of the headlines, the media, what people are saying. Joe Biden's speech tonight, there will either be a narrative tomorrow about Joe Biden, doing great, doing fine, or not doing well. And people will be looking for those signals, because there are people who dislike Donald Trump intensely, think he is gross, think he is bad. But they are not Democrats, and they don't like Democrats that much. And they're looking for an excuse sometimes to not feel like they own the Donald Trump vote, to feel okay about it, sleep at night. And one of the ways they do that is they tell themselves, well, Joe Biden it's concern trolling. It's he wasn't really up to it, and I just didn't feel safe putting him in charge of the country. If he can obliterate that narrative tonight and with the debates.
Interesting. So one of the things that we've talked about in the past, and Ben, you can weigh in here if you disagree, but one of the things we've talked about in the past is I have brought up that there shouldn't be debates, that I don't think that debates are actually that helpful in changing minds in any way. I don't think anyone ever really wins them. I think they end up being talking points. I think that they end up being the right says they won, the left says they won, and I think that they're bullshit. And no one actually changes their mind because of a debate. I'm curious to hear what you think about that, because you bring up the convention. He's going to read off a teleprompter. Hopefully he'll be able to do it. It'll be okay. Not a big deal. I will say that Donald Trump did say Yosemite just a few weeks ago when reading off a teleprompter. But and no one is bringing up, there are no massive charges about his senility coming up as far as I know. I
just want to say, as a Semite, I felt very seen when he said he was talking to me.
I mean, he's the president of the country, so I kind of think that, and it's a national parks, but I have a lot of friends who are not native English speakers, and that like is a very confusing word. So I actually think that it's not. I felt a little like, oh, I kind of get it. But anyways, my point is like, what do you think of the debates, Sarah? Do you think that do you think that they should even happen? Do you think that they have any potential to change minds?
Yeah, it's the same thing I think about the convention. And here's the thing, right? So if right now you'd much rather be Joe Biden than Donald Trump in terms of where you are in the race, right? So Joe Biden basically has this task set out for him for the next 2 months, which is to help people understand why they can affirmatively vote for him, but primarily to do no harm. And all of the known unknowns that we sort of knew were sitting out there for the last few months, we knew he was going to pick a vice president. We knew he was going to have a convention. We knew there was going to be debates. There's going to be these inflection points where narratives are going to form and cement and matter. And the individual incident and people watching it is different from allowing narratives to cement themselves in the sort of broader minds of the public. Because it's not that everybody will sit and watch the debate and make up their own mind. It's that the smartest person that they know, that they talk to about politics, where they help get informed about what they should be thinking, that person will watch the debate. And that person, and you're right that like, for a lot of people, they've made up their minds already. But it is extremely important that there not be a cratering for Joe Biden, right? For a bunch of people right now, the independents that broke for Donald Trump in 2016 won him the race, right? 77,000 votes in 3 states. Independents breaking for him made a huge difference. Right now, Joe Biden is winning with independents, and he needs to keep it that way. And so I'm just afraid of, working to elect a Democrat has made me neurotic. Like, I think,
why?
Because I'm scared all the time. I'm worried all the time. When Joe Biden is,
about who?
About Biden's performance, about,
okay. So
how the polls look, about the ability to win, about the post office, about how people are going to be able to vote. I mean,
But you didn't. Who did you work for before?
Well, I mean, I just think there's something about being a Republican where you have a kind of confidence. And I mean, actually, it was just a different time. I'm not sure I can compare exactly.
I just feel like Biden is not that much worse in any appreciable sense than like Romney or McCain. Like, I was like always nervous watching McCain. Like, I just always thought he seemed very old and like very kind of like, and so I'm just very kind of like, I'm just really interested why you think that like you're more nervous about supporting a Democratic candidate here than maybe another. Maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying.
No, I think you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. The thing that I'm neurotic about, what I worry about all the time, is that Donald Trump could win again.
Oh, yeah.
So I live in complete fear of that happening. And so I need Joe Biden to have absolutely no slip ups over the next 2 months. He needs to wear a helmet when he's on a bicycle.
Yeah. What the hell was that about?
When he's talking, I find myself kind of being like, I watch everything pulling for him so hard. And just
so it's not something unique to a Democratic candidate. It's just something unique to a candidate that's going to defeat Trump.
And it's unique to me, I think, just in this moment where I've never felt, I think this happened to a lot of people in 2016. We had a vision in our minds of who the country was and what it would do when presented with a choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. And it didn't do that thing. And it shook our faith in a lot of different elements of things. And now over the last 3 years, I've developed kind of PTSD from 2016 where, I don't trust the polls. And I am worried about, exogenous events that come out of nowhere and impact the general narratives of the race. And that's why I think debates matter, the convention matters, everything that happens in the next 2 months when people increasingly pay attention matters, because it will cement narratives that will carry us through the election.
That's a wonderful response to my debate question. I think it's very, I think that's incredibly comprehensive. So thank you. That was good.
Catherine, the floor is yours.
Yes. Hi. Can you hear me?
I can.
Indeed.
Okay. Hi, Sarah. I'm a big fan of yours and your work.
I know you from Twitter, and you just popped up on the screen.
I know they're very Canon bait. Ben and Kate are very, very generous. I also have PTSD, so from the election stuff. I had two questions. I'm not sure which one you wanted me to ask. Two of which I'm
Pose them
fascinated.
both, since you're here.
Okay. Hi. So the two, you've done a lot of this on podcasts I listen to, but I'm curious, can you tell us, I love this focus work that you do about wavering Trump supporters. And from last time I listened to you, which was fairly recently, it sounded, I think it was on the Bulwark podcast. By the way, I have a terrible crush on Charlie Sykes. I know he's married,
Who's
but just
coming on Monday?
He is hilarious.
He's coming on.
He's hilarious. Okay. Anyways, you can tell him that. Okay, so tell us.
Okay. We have a bunch of people who have crushes on Tim Miller that have even less of a chance.
Yeah, but I have no chance with Tim Miller.
I'm sorry. Do you have people who have crushes on me? Because that feels like Charlie and Tim. Really?
Hi, Sarah.
Because
I really appreciate it.
It's a mind thing, and humor is a big aphrodisiac for me, huge, especially now.
Sarah's pretty funny.
She's hilarious, but she's married. You know, she's married. I wouldn't do that.
We can move on from this line of conversation.
I know. No, I think you're fabulous. I think work's so important. But so tell us a little bit about some of the more recent focus, because I am really curious. I do not want to be one of those Americans who think that people who voted for Trump are all stupid and, they screwed the country. I do think that they're fellow Americans, whether or not I agree with them. So any insights into that? And then my second question quickly was I know that you and your mentors, Bill Kristol, all those people are talking about the future of conservative politics and post-Trump. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Thank you. And thank you for what you do.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Those are fun questions to answer, especially the first one. Oh, you left. Okay.
No, she's still there. She's just not on the screen anymore.
All right.
She can hear you.
So on the focus groups, which I love talking about, and which there's always a lot to unpack, because there's so much in there. But it's funny. I really started them. I started them early. It was one of the first things I did when I launched Defending Democracy Together with Bill Kristol and some of the Linda Chavez, Mona Sharon, some of the other folks. And it was because we were all just in rooms of sad Republicans all sitting around being like, what happened to the party? Why did voters do this? And I was like, well, we can go ask. And so for the last 3 years, I've been doing these focus groups, and it culminated really in the project that we built, Republican Voters Against Trump, because one of the things that came through loud and clear in the focus groups that I think relates to the question is in terms of what was persuadable to people. It became very clear that the stuff that goes viral on Twitter, lots of which, we were doing and is fast and clever and hits Trump hard, none of that is persuasive with these voters. And so when we built Republican Voters Against Trump, it was because we had been testing just the storytelling part, the real people sort of explaining why they weren't going to vote for Donald Trump in 2020 that identified as Republicans. And it became very clear that, politics is so tribal. And so we both wanted to have people who said, this is the tribe I'm from. I've been a Republican my entire life, but I am not voting for Donald Trump, and I am voting for Joe Biden for the following reasons. And it sort of builds like a third tribe where it's safe for somebody to maintain their Republican identity, but vote for Joe Biden. But anyway, these voters, because your question is sort of like, tell me why I shouldn't hate them and think that they wrecked the country. And I would argue strenuously that you should not hate them and feel like they wrecked the country. And there's a few reasons for that. One is that they are genuinely good people and I'm not speaking for everyone. In every group of 8, there's often one person where I want to get the hook out. But send that back. But for a lot of them, right, they live their lives and they are not attached to politics the way that we are. And so we think, how is it possible that somebody could see all of these things about Donald Trump, know all of these things, and still support him? And the answer is they don't know these things. And to the extent that they have heard about them and they're, in the ether, they have been so the information stream that they get. Ann Applebaum wrote a great piece that was like a deep dive on our research, just about how little of the information these people get, how little of it breaks through, and how little trust they have when it does, that it's legitimate. And so that creates just a real confusion for people, where the bulk of what they get is from like a Facebook page, and alerts on their phones. I think that, look, there is a Trump base, people who go to his rallies and who have signed up for the xenophobia, the racism, the circus, the disgusting way that he behaves. That is not, most of these voters that I talk to, they would never go to one of his things. They don't like him very much. They don't think he shares their values, but they have two things in their heads that I think is hard to understand, but people should appreciate, which is they got to know him not as a politician. They got to know him. I always ask this. I'm like, did you watch The Apprentice? And everyone's always like, yeah, I watched The Apprentice. I've never watched The Apprentice. I
didn't either.
So what
does that change for people?
Well, it makes him look like a carefully curated businessman, right? Who is decisive and firing people and rich. And so what you hear from people is
like the epitome of like kind of some type of American, American dream.
It's right. And so like they view him totally differently. And they had like an intimate relationship with him in which he was in their living rooms, on the regular for many years, as this decisive, consummate businessman. And so I think, that's just a big piece of what they carry with them. And I mean, I have people all the time say, there was a guy not that long ago, when COVID hit, he was talking about when he stopped supporting Donald Trump and why he was making a video for RVAT. And he said, I voted for him. I didn't really like him, but I'm a Republican, so I voted for him. He's like, and then I wasn't really paying attention. And when COVID hit, I was driven inside my house. I started watching the news because I was looking for information. And I saw Trump on TV, and I couldn't believe that's how he acted. And like, it was like that person for the first time was watching the briefings saying, oh, look at this lunatic. But
that's
most
so
people just see snippets.
That is so interesting. That is so interesting.
You should, if you just stalked some people for a while and followed them around and listened to them talk about politics, you would hear them talk about it in a way where you would be like, somebody posted this on Twitter the other day where they heard someone say to their friend while they were walking, oh, did you know that Joe Biden picked a woman? And like Joe Biden has said he was going to pick a woman for months and months. We all knew this, but like that stuff doesn't penetrate people for whom politics is such a small part of their lives. Is that
all right? So, Kate, pose your question. Then I'm going to pose the question that immediately follows yours because it's on a related subject. And then we are going to go to David, who is not Daniel.
Okay, yeah. So my question was related to Steve Bannon again. Like, not to bring it back to that, but you never actually explained how it was that he got arrested by the Postal Service of all things, or like why the Postal Service can arrest. Like, I'm a lawyer. Like, I didn't know the Postal Service could. I mean, I was like, the Coast Guard makes a little bit of sense in this story, but the Postal Service. So I'm very curious to like know what's going on.
All right. And the following question from Evan is, will Bannon flip? So, Sarah, I have some thoughts on these questions? And I know the answer to the Postal Service question.
Yeah, this is the answer by an expert. I'll just be speculating.
Okay, so let me. So the easy question is the Postal Service question. The Postal Service actually does have a criminal investigative unit. They're sometimes called postal inspectors. Some of them are even pretty good. The Postal Service criminal inspection group arose out of, I think the original, there was one of the relatively early law enforcement agencies, and it was because people used to send contraband through the mail, and it remains, and it is often used. It is sometimes used in situations in which, for example, the FBI is unavailable for one reason or another. So, for example, John Durham's investigation, I believe, maybe using Postal Service, postal inspectors, because it's partly an investigation of the way the FBI handled certain things. And so the question here that's, I think, very interesting is, why did the FBI have apparently not participate in this investigation? And I don't know the answer to that question, but Postal Service inspectors are a real thing, and they are a real law enforcement agency, and some of them are actually very good. Now, the will Bannon flip question, that's super speculative. First of all, there's a couple things that you can. One is Bannon cooperated very fully with the Mueller investigation, and his testimony or his interviews are all over the Mueller report. There's no account in the Mueller report of his not being cooperative, and actually there's no account of them not crediting sort of things he said. He was pretty forthcoming. He gave a lot of interviews, and so he may not have a whole lot to tell that he hasn't already told federal officials. So one question is, does Bannon have anything that the Southern District of New York doesn't already know or isn't already in 302s? The second question is, are they interested in cutting a deal with him, and does he want to cut a deal with them? And we don't know the answers to any of those questions, and so you can't really responsibly address the will Bannon flip question without having a good sense of the answers to, I would say, at least two of those three questions. So that's what I can tell you about that. David, who is not Daniel, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon. Sarah, really appreciate the Bulwark. I think it's just fabulous. And someday, maybe we can get Amy Stoddard to visit in lieu of fun. Just an idea.
AB would be great.
So a question for you is, how long will it take, or will the Republican Party ever be able to recover? So that's part one. And part two is the flip side of the coin. What can be done or should be done to keep the Democratic Party from being corrupted by not having a viable Republican Party to bump up against?
Yeah, I think, thanks. It's a great question, and it allows me to sort of answer the second part of Catherine's question too, which I spent too long on the focus groups, which doesn't even scratch the surface of answering that about the focus groups. But this future of the Republican Party question is an important one, and it's one of those "it depends" answers, right? So one of the reasons that this election is so important, and why I get really anxious about anybody who feels complacent looking at polls and feeling like, Biden's kind of got this in the bag, is that the important part of this election is not just that Joe Biden wins. Joe Biden must win by landslide margins in a way that is a thorough repudiation of both Trump and Trumpism. Not only that will be good for the country to see us reject what we have seen over the last 3.5, 4 years, but also because if there is any hope of a center-right party emerging that is responsible and is worth giving governing power, then it will have to be something. There's this debate going on within sort of the NeverTrump community or the Trump skeptical community about whether you should burn it all down. And I have David French argues that you should take each Republican and you should still support good Republicans. And I sort of said, okay, I take that point. I let's say I agree with that. I would vote for Mitt Romney or Larry Hogan, and that's it. Because
did you hear what Mitt Romney did to his dog on the roof of that car?
Yeah, I think people were very unfair to Mitt Romney back in the day, and I hope everybody realizes that now, because he's been real stand up in this moment. But he's basically alone, and I think that every Republican who failed to put guardrails around this president, who isn't speaking up ever. I mean, whether we've elected a new QAnon congresswoman or whether another Trump associate has been indicted, whatever it is, Republicans have been so criminally silent in this moment. And then, of course, failing to actually impeach and even allow witnesses. Like, there have been no guardrails. And so the question that I think about all the time, if I want a future center-right party, I think it's going to be a multi-cycle process. I think it requires a landslide victory out of Biden that sends Republicans into the wilderness with the stink of Trump on them, and having everybody kind of be like, Trump who? Because let me tell you something about just on Trump. Trump has never been nearly as interested in beating Democrats as he has been at beating Republicans into submission. He wants to own the Republican Party. He wants to be a kingmaker there. And that's why, he's sowing all of this distrust in the election, because he needs to be aggrieved so he can continue to hold on to people. This was unfair. They took this away from you. But it needs to be beyond the shadow of a doubt of a defeat, so that people actually say, you know what, that was a mistake. And actually, in the process, we've now lost women. We've lost the suburbs. We've accelerated a political realignment that was already happening with some demographic changes. And the party doesn't have a future as a party that can build a coalition to get power unless it reforms itself.
But
and
what
that's
do
how
you do.
happening.
So let's say that happens.
Yeah.
And we end up with a Democratic Senate, we have a Democratic House, that's not going anywhere, and Joe Biden with 400 electoral votes.
Yeah.
And you are happy for 3 months.
Yeah.
You're really excited. And then they take office and they start doing a whole lot of things that you disagree with, and that you became a Republican because you don't believe. And you find yourself caught between policies that you think are being advanced by good, decent people who are wrong, and being objected to by people who are saying a lot of things that you agree with about the policies, but you know that they're actually Jim Jordan, right? They're actually Marco Rubio. They're actually... What do you do with that? At what point do you say, I have to have a tactical alliance with the people I agree with, even though I very much don't trust them, and I know that they have disgraced themselves in democratic pre-political commitments against the people who I have democratic pre-political commitments in common with, but they're doing all these stupid wrong things. Like, what does 6 months into a Biden administration look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, you're describing it's a great question, and actually framed in just the right way to make me squirm.
Sorry.
That's the worst. That's the worst case. It's not the worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario is Trump winning. But my hope is, right. And I may be naive to think this. I've certainly been, I think, like Charlie Brown with the football when it comes to Republicans and thinking that they would do the right thing. I do think it's going to matter what, and this is why I think Joe Biden, for me, is a good nominee. Like, my hope is that Joe Biden doesn't come in and prioritize, eliminating the filibuster out of the gate, but that instead he looks at things like, okay, we just had our real brush with somebody who was trying to actively undermine the institutions of democracy. So the first thing we're going to do is try to build consensus around, just like we did post-Watergate, around a series of reforms that are things like, you can't install your kids in the White House and their spouses can't run the executive branch. And let's get bipartisan consensus around some of the things that undergird our democracy.
To be fair, Hillary Clinton had a huge place in the White House, and that was somewhat justified. She was very qualified for that role in a lot of ways. But this is something I'm not trying to defend the literal nepotism of the Trump White House, but I don't know, there is some element of, it has run amok in this particular administration, but I don't think that it is Bobby Kennedy played a role in in JFK's administration.
But I actually think those situations are very different. So Bobby Kennedy was a very bad situation, and Congress responded to it with an anti-nepotism law that forbid that. It effectively rebuked
Thank you.
John F. Kennedy for it.
I was hoping someone would say that.
Hillary Clinton, I will defend her role. As much as I disagree with a lot of the things that she did. Bill Clinton ran saying, you vote for one and you get the two of us. He actually promised that
Yeah.
she was going to play a substantial role. And so I think the role,
That's a wonderful
the,
point.
the role, like Donald Trump promised that his kids wouldn't be in the White House,
Yes.
right? Bill Clinton, actually, if you go back to the things he said during the 1992 campaign about Hillary Clinton, he talked about her as one of the best policy minds he knew and somebody who he was going to give a major role to. And people voted for that.
Yep.
And so I actually think it's I don't love the dynastic aspects of the Clintons at all, but I do think that original thing is not the same thing as what we're talking about here.
And I think, look, first ladies have always had some role. Now, she was maybe somewhat Eleanor Roosevelt, like lots of first lady. I think that's different from having this like multiple children and their spouses. I mean, Jared's role is unprecedented, the extent to which he is involved. And the fact
it is crazy. Like, it's completely insane.
But
It's
that's
insane.
just one example. And I saw somebody put in the comments like that's HR1. Like, I'm not talking about democracy reform issues. I'm talking about anti-corruption reform. I'm talking about the making the rules pretty clear around how family members are engaged. I think the idea of releasing taxes, going from a norm to something that you have to do to the president, because when you are somebody who has the kind of foreign financial entanglements that Donald Trump has, the American people should know who you're beholden to financially, who you're connected to financially. Like, that matters. And I think, we're a long way from putting a peanut farm in a blind trust. And so I think that there's a lot of things that we have seen and learned from Donald Trump where we can no longer rely on norms, especially in this hyper-polarized environment. And so I think you would get buy-in from enough Republicans to put some of these things in place that would help enhance the guardrails that we've seen get undermined in this administration. So, like, my point my point is that there are still things that I feel like we can work on together, but also I'm not sure that my best case scenario, like, I think a lot of these Republican senators do deserve to live, but like, if everybody lost and Susan Collins hung on, like, I'm not going to cry over her if she loses, because I think she's been quite bad, but she did so much on LGBT stuff. Like, she led the way on repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell in terms of whipping a Republican bloc together.
Yeah.
Like, I have a massive soft spot for Susan Collins. And it's, if there was
it has melted for me in the last couple of years.
I want it to be close.
I agree.
I want it to be close in terms of, I want there to be consensus building in Congress. That's the whole point.
All right. So I want to sketch out for you in the few minutes that we have remaining what I think is the first 2-year Biden agenda that retains the support of the vast bulk of the NeverTrump Republicans who would vote for him without losing the left or without really infuriating the left. And so my question is, am I fantasizing, or does something like this actually sound plausible to you? Number one, a huge amount of his role over the next first year is going to be COVID containment and management. Yeah. That is not a political issue. The governors who've handled it well, run from Republicans to Democrats. Republicans, some of the Republican governors have been among the worst, but a lot of the Democratic governors haven't been great either. It's basically a management issue and it's a competence issue. You get a huge, if you identify, that's your first priority, both for public health and safety reasons and for the economy reasons. If he does that well, he's going to have a lot of support. Number two, I think most Never-Trumpers accept in their uncomfortable neo-Keynesian way that in the course of saving the economy in this, we are going to spend shitloads and shitloads and shitloads of money. Mm-hmm. So there is no deal to be made, apparently, between Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi on the next, or Mitch McConnell on the next bailout reform. But if Chuck Schumer were majority leader and Biden were president, there'd be a deal in an hour. and you would basically support it, or maybe you'd criticize the edges of it, but the core that we need to keep extending unemployment while people are stuck at home is not going to be controversial. Okay, all of a sudden, we're through the first 6 months of an administration. Like these are the economic management and management
Just
of the
like we're through
COVID
the first
crisis.
6 months of a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, like if you handle that well, that's the first year, and all of a sudden the economy is growing, and we haven't had a major fight about the major issue on the table yet. So my question is, why shouldn't and then you pair that with an agenda that is, so the left gets a huge amount of what it wants through the spending, which, you guys kind of, since the spending has to happen, you're not going to make too much noise about. And then the other element is a whole lot of anti-corruption / democracy reform, making it, which, you guys on the Bulwark are like almost as militant about as the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights now. And so my point is, you pair those three things together, and there's actually a governing agenda that covers, I think, sort of 70% of the political spectrum for a year and a half.
So,
what do you think?
First of all, I think that's excellent and true. I think there's also other sort of healing elements that could come in that Joe Biden is uniquely suited toward it. And also, don't forget that Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell actually have a pretty good relationship. So, like, that maybe creates a little less of this just Republicans are the party of no, we're just going to oppose everything that you do. Now, there will be a fight in there over the Supreme Court, because you're going to have RBG is definitely going to retire the second that there's a Democratic butt in that seat. And so there will be some flashpoints, but there will also be other opportunities for things like racial reconciliation, which Joe Biden is uniquely and Kamala Harris are uniquely suited toward. That there's a lot of Republicans who are like, yeah, that divisive stuff that Donald Trump was doing is no good. Like, there are a bunch of things, and I'm not talking about hot button third rail issues like reparations. I'm just talking about the language that people use and the symbols that people, the kind of the symbolism of the way that people show that we're coming together as a country. And I think that Joe Biden will be quite interested. He's running on a unity message, and I think he'll govern with an eye towards unifying. And you're right. I think you're right that the economic fights get put to the side in a lot of ways, just because of where we'll be. And we already know that the Republican conference is split on those issues. Like, there's a bunch of people who are saying, yeah, we don't want to spend more. And there's a bunch of other people who are like, we have to right now. We have no choice.
Kate, should we wrap, or do you have more?
Yeah, no, I have nothing more. Like, Sarah, I will always remember this moment in time as the moment in time in which you told me about Steve Bannon being arrested on a yacht by the U.S. Postal Service. And wore
because he didn't have enough stamps,
and wore a
he
and
sent
wore
that
like a
piece
zip-up
of mail with
like,
inadequate postage, and they came after him.
Yeah.
So it was like, thank you for coming on. I love having you. I can't believe it's been so long since we've had you. Like, you should come on more regularly. I think especially going into the election, Ben, we should talk about this, but we should have more people in kind of.
We should have like Bulwark Day on In Lieu of Fun.
Yeah, we really should. Like, we should have
mass.
more people like Tim and like all of these other people that are kind of like, I just love it. It just is like so intellectually enriching, and it feels so civil and calm, and like it feels like a way to express an idea. I don't know. So thank you, Sarah. I'm very happy.
We have Charlie coming on Monday, and for those of you who don't listen to the Bulwark podcast, I've told Mike Pesca this. It is one of only two podcasts that I listen to essentially every day, the other one being Pesca's. They are super different, and yet they have something ineffable in common, and I think Charlie has really become one of the most interesting voices in podcasting. And Sarah, as the person who pulled that whole Bulwark thing together, Sarah is, among other things, the publisher of the Bulwark. We didn't get a chance to talk about Republican voters against Trump. You guys have had a big week, so to send us out, give us the what are you guys up to in the video knife in the back department.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I got a little plug in there earlier when I was talking about how we use the focus groups for the project. But look, we have like over 600 of these Republican voters and Trump voters who've changed their minds or who are not supporting Trump in 2016, in 2020, have sent us these testimonials. And it's been amazing. And we're running those ads in swing states. We are putting $20 million behind a very tailored effort in swing states to reach persuadable Republican Trump voters and try to get them to vote for Biden with these like real stories from people in their tribe. So that's the campaign. But we had a cool week this week because we had a testimonial from somebody who wasn't kind of just a regular voter, but actually was the chief of staff to Kirstjen Nielsen at DHS for a couple of years. He was a Trump administration official, Miles Taylor. And Miles Taylor did something this week that nobody's done up until this point, which is somebody from, we know all this stuff about the administration. We know how bad it is in there. People come out, they write books, Bolton writes a book, but they always stop short, John Kelly, even Mattis, they always stop short of A, endorsing Biden, which Miles did unequivocally. And two, they don't just say, it's always sort of vague. Like he just looks in the camera and he says he's unfit. It was terrifying to listen to him. He would only help people if he thought they would help him politically. When the California wildfires were raging and burning down people's houses, he told us, don't help them. California doesn't support me. He wanted to swap Puerto Rico for Greenland because Puerto Rico was filled with poor people. I mean, it is an insider's account told with both moral clarity and real determination to try to express what is going on there. Obviously, it went viral on Twitter, and then he's been all over the news because he's the first person to really do this. And, I think about everything in terms of permission structures. These real voter voices are about trying to give other voters permission to vote for Joe Biden. But Miles Taylor is about trying to give people who've been in this administration, who have seen this stuff up close, know how scary it is, know that Trump is unfit. I mean, you think about John Bolton talking about how manifestly unfit Donald Trump is and then demur on endorsing Joe Biden. Like Donald Trump's either an existential threat or he's not. And he just wrote a whole book about how he is an existential threat. So I think it's easy to say, so I'm for the other guy. And Biden may be whatever, but he is not an existential threat to democracy. In fact, I think he's actually a pretty good choice for this moment in time, personally.
I would have also been happy had he still been alive with like someone like John McCain. Like, honestly, like I just would have been thrilled with that. Like that would have been wonderful. But Sarah, this was amazing. We didn't get to talk about the one thing that I had in the back of my brain that I wanted to ask you about. So we'll have to have you back on again. But it was about third-party candidates. And the role of third-party candidates in the last kind of couple of elections. Well, it's actually like many elections, starting with the kind of nadir, but like kind of like the role of third-party candidates and the lack of a third-party candidate this year, which I think is kind of amazing. But
I don't want Kanye chopped liver.
Yeah.
He is actually chopped liver. Like there's no like, what are you talking about? Like that's not a third. Anyways. I just kind of want to, I just think that it's a really interesting move by third parties. We don't have to talk about it right now. But
I would love to jump into that, mainly because it allows Ben Wittes and I to have the conversation we like to have the most, which is about the importance of ranked choice voting in democracy.
So there's for those of you who think
this is fading away.
think Sarah may be serious. Sarah and I have been to many conferences together, and we have developed what we have dubbed the Longwell-Wittes law of political scientists at conferences,
which
is
great.
The law is as follows. The larger the number of political scientists, as the number of political scientists at a conference increases, the amount of time it takes the subject at hand to turn to ranked choice voting approaches zero.
We're always just like texting each other like, look, there it is. So
there it is.
Oh 4 minutes.
Oh my God.
All right.
I really love that. Okay. Sarah,
the
come back
poll
on whenever
today.
you hell you want. Just message
Tell
us,
them
literally.
to invite me.
The,
We don't,
the
like-
poll. You just text us and say when
I was just gonna say,
when we say
can we,
come
like-
on Thursday or whenever.
I think we need to send out some type of email or something being like, hello, favorite people. We love you. Like, come on whenever the hell you want. Just like text us when you want to be on.
The we love you list.
Yes.
Anyway, you're on it. Only one person other than Kate has voted that they knew about the Bannon indictment
How do you know
before.
it's me? How do you
I
know?
Because I saw you grin, and then I saw that number of false go up by one. So somebody else other than Kate learned about Bannon on In Lieu of Fun today. We will be back tomorrow. Who do we have? Tomorrow we have Scott Shapiro coming back, right?
Yeah, Scott's going to come
Who
back.
is
That
one
gonna
of
be
the
so
funniest
fun.
law professors around.
His Twitter feed is amazing. You should follow
Yeah.
it.
It's
And
the
also like
funniest
his
law professor Twitter feed.
and like he's not just a law professor, he's a law philosopher. So like imagine how hard that is to be funny.
So he can make you laugh. So that will happen in 22 hours and 49 minutes. And until then, Kate.
We don't have fun anymore. So in lieu of fun, I am still just going to go to sleep tonight imagining the 7:15 a.m. look on the face of Steve Bannon as the U.S. Postal Service arrived at his yacht to serve him with papers for indictment. Thank you so much for giving me that image. It's like a happy sailing off into sleep land image.
No
It's
pun
pretty good. And then I'll
Bye,
think
guys.